My wife said during couples therapy, if I had to choose between you and my ex right now, I'd choose him. The therapist went silent. I stood up, looked at her, and said, then go choose him. I walked out. The voicemail she left that night begging me to come back went unanswered. That was how the end started. Not with a bang, but with a confession delivered in a sterile, beige office, sitting on a worn leather couch that smelled faintly of antiseptic and old coffee. I, Walter, was 36 years old. I had been married to Sarah, who was 34, for 7 years, and we had been together for 9 total. We had no children. That was always the easy point of conflict we deflected to. She wasn't ready. The timeline kept being pushed back year after year, and I respected that because I thought we had all the time in the world. Looking back now, sitting here in the quiet numbness that followed that session, I realize maybe that was the very first sign, the one I should have paid meticulous attention to. Maybe she was never truly planning a permanent future with me. We had been in couples therapy for about 3 months. It was Sarah's idea, actually. She was the one who said we had lost our spark, that we needed a professional to help us reconnect. I agreed immediately. I loved her, still did, and I was absolutely ready to fix whatever she felt was broken between us. I thought we were making genuine progress. The therapist, Dr. Evans, was competent and seemed insightful. We were communicating more openly than we had in years. I was learning to use her love language, or whatever the proper terminology was these days. I genuinely believed we were turning a corner, finally putting in the work to build something stronger than what we had before. Last Tuesday was our usual session, 6 o'clock in the evening. Same office, same uncomfortable leather couch, same routine. Dr. Evans asked us to engage in an exercise she called radical honesty. It was a safe space for truth, she called it, where we were meant to be brutally honest about our deepest, most confusing feelings. No judgment, no interruptions, just raw honesty from both of us. We agreed. Sarah went first. She talked about feeling disconnected lately. She mentioned how she sometimes wondered if she had settled too quickly when she married me, if she had rushed the decision. She spoke about missing the passion and the excitement of her 20s. I listened, my jaw tight, but I felt a strange kind of empathy. This was normal stuff, I rationalized. Every marriage has its valleys. Every long-term relationship goes through phases where the excitement dims. I waited for her to conclude, ready to offer my perspective and reinforce my commitment to the hard work. Then Dr. Evans asked her a question that, in a single instant, changed the gravity of the room. If you could go back and make a different choice about your life, would you? Sarah got quiet. Really quiet. The air conditioning unit hummed loudly above us, but the silence between us was deafening. It was the kind of quiet that makes your stomach drop straight through the floor because you can physically feel something terrible coming, and you are utterly powerless to stop it. Sometimes I think about him, she said softly, almost whispering. My ex. The one before you. I knew exactly who she meant. They had dated for 2 years in her mid-20s. He had actually broken up with her, moved away for a job opportunity, and did not want to maintain a long-distance relationship. When we first met, she had been completely devastated. I was the one who helped her heal from that heartbreak. I was patient. I was kind. I was everything she had told me she needed at the time. Or so I thought. Dr. Evans merely nodded, encouraging her to continue exploring these feelings, reinforcing the safe space. I have been following him on social media, Sarah admitted, her voice gaining a slight tremor. He moved back to the area about a year ago. He is not married. And I wonder sometimes, what if things had been different? What if he had stayed? My heart was pounding so hard, I could hear the blood rushing in my ears. But I stayed quiet. Safe space for truth, right? That is what we agreed to. Do you ever reach out to him? The therapist asked gently. We have messaged a few times. Nothing inappropriate. Just catching up, seeing how each other are doing. News to me. Complete and total news. My mind was reeling, the weight of a year of deliberate omission hitting me like a physical blow. She had never mentioned any of this. Not once in the year since he had apparently been back in the area. Dr. Evans then turned her attention to me. Walter, how does hearing this make you feel? Before I could even formulate a rational response, Sarah kept going, the words flooding out of her like a dam had suddenly broken. I do not know if I married the right person. I love you. She looked at me with tears finally forming in her eyes. I do. I really do. But I do not know if I am in love with you anymore. There is a difference. And when I think about him, I feel alive, electric, the way I used to feel when everything was new and exciting. Dr. Evans leaned forward in her chair. This is important work. Let us explore this feeling more deeply. If you had to choose right now, in this exact moment, between your husband and your ex, what would your gut tell you? I expected hesitation. I expected her to say she was confused and needed more time to process. I expected something that acknowledged the 7 years we had built together. Instead, without missing a single beat, she delivered the line that vaporized my marriage, her eyes locked on mine. If I had to choose between you and him right now, I would choose him. The room went dead silent. The only sound was the incessant, rattling hum of the air conditioning unit, suddenly amplified to an unbearable volume. Dr. Evans's professional mask cracked for a second. I saw a flicker of shock, a genuine reaction hidden quickly behind her training. She had not expected that answer either. In all her years of mediating crisis, she probably had not heard something so brutally honest and devastating. I sat there for perhaps 5 seconds, though it felt closer to an hour. 9 years of my life, 7 years of marriage, all the time invested in this woman, building a home together, planning a future, supporting each other through every hard time we faced. And she had just told me, in front of a licensed witness whose job was to save us, that she would choose a guy who dumped her years ago over me, her husband. A cold, calm clarity washed over the shock. It was not anger that moved me, it was an overwhelming, icy certainty. There was nothing left to fight for. I stood up slowly, the worn leather of the couch sighing under my weight. Then go choose him, I said. My voice was low and steady. It did not shake, which surprised me. I grabbed my jacket from the back of the chair. Wet, that is not what I. Sarah started, reaching for my arm. Her face crumpled with sudden regret. I pulled away from her touch, the physical rejection feeling necessary and absolute. No, I said, holding up a hand to stop her. You just told me, in couples therapy specifically designed to save our marriage, that you would pick your ex over me without hesitating, without even thinking about it. What exactly am I supposed to do with that information? Beg you to reconsider. Compete for your attention. No. You want him. Go get him. We are done. The tears finally began to flow down her cheeks, a mix of panic and confusion. This was supposed to be a safe space, Walter. A place for truth. I was just being honest, like you always asked me to be. And I genuinely appreciate the honesty, I conceded. Now I finally know exactly where I stand in your heart. It is not first place. Goodbye. I turned, walked out of the office, and did not look back. I did not pause at the front desk. I did not say goodbye to Dr. Evans. I just kept moving until I was out in the late afternoon air. The light was fading, and the air smelled like an impending storm. The action felt less like a dramatic exit and more like pulling an ejection seat lever, necessary, violent, and the only path to survival. I got into my car and drove straight to my buddy, Ethan Stone's, apartment. Ethan was my closest friend. I had known him since freshman year of college. He was a quiet, stable guy, working as a local musician and bartender, and he was currently nursing a quiet internal conflict of his own, having backed away from a serious relationship a year before. When I showed up on his doorstep unannounced, looking like I had been hit by a truck, he knew instantly something profound had shattered. I laid out the entire story over a bottle of whiskey, the narrative coming out disjointed and raw. Ethan did not say much, which was exactly what I needed. He just listened intently, his gaze steady, and poured another drink when mine got empty. He gave me the space to process the shock and the trauma without offering an opinion or attempting to fix me. He just offered his presence, his worn leather armchair, and the silence. That silence was more valuable than any advice in that moment. At 11:47 that night, my phone buzzed with an incoming voicemail. It was Sarah. I waited until Ethan was out of the room before playing it. Her voice was frantic and thick with tears. Baby, please. I did not mean it like that. It was just the exercise. I was being hypothetical. Please come home. I love you. I chose you 7 years ago. What I said came out completely wrong. Please call me back. I am so sorry. Please? I am begging you. I listened to the message once, taking in every frantic word, every choked sob. The plea for forgiveness felt less about me and more about her sudden, sharp panic over the consequences. She was not begging for me, she was begging for the life she had just unilaterally destroyed. I took a deep breath, absorbing the final, crushing emotional beat of the day, feeling the last thread of hope snap inside my chest. Then I turned off my phone completely and went to sleep on Ethan's couch. The voicemail remained unanswered. That was 4 days ago. I had not been home since. I had not returned any of her calls, any of her texts, or responded to a single message. Some people might argue that I was overreacting, that I should have stayed and talked it through like adults, given her a chance to retract or explain the context. But here was the one thought that had solidified in the quiet hours on Ethan's couch, the thought that had become my unwavering moral compass. She did not hesitate. Not for a single second. Not even a flicker of doubt crossed her face. After 7 years of marriage, 9 years together, she did not even pause before saying she would choose someone else over me. That was not a slip of the tongue or a momentary lapse in judgment induced by a therapist. That was the profound truth finally coming out in a moment when her guard was completely down. That was who she really was. And I owed it to myself to believe her immediately. I was meeting with a divorce attorney the very next morning. The process had begun immediately, irreversible now, fueled not by anger, but by a quiet, determined self-respect. Leaving the voicemail unanswered was not just silence, it was a promise to myself that my dignity was no longer negotiable. I spent the next few days in a fog, going through the motions of working remotely from Ethan's cramped, spare desk. Ethan never pressed me, simply ensuring there was coffee and a fresh shirt ready in the morning. His quiet stability was the anchor I needed as the ground beneath me crumbled. The attorney meeting was sobering, yet strangely clarifying. His name was Arthur, a family law specialist recommended by a colleague. I laid out the entire situation in precise, unemotional detail. The assets were standard. A house purchased 5 years ago with both our names on the deed, joint retirement accounts, joint savings, 2 cars, and absolutely no prenup. I was young and stupid and head over heels in love, I explained. Arthur's assessment was straightforward in our state. Everything gets split roughly 50-50 in a no-fault divorce. He explained that the law did not care about feelings or betrayal. It did not care that I had helped Sarah heal from heartbreak, and it certainly did not care what she had said in a therapy session. The bottom line was the financial reality. I would lose about half of everything I had spent years building. The house would likely need to be sold, but that tangible loss felt secondary to the immediate, necessary gain of my freedom. I signed the retainer anyway. My sanity and self-respect were worth the cost, even if the price tag was steep. Arthur sent Sarah the divorce papers by certified mail on Wednesday afternoon. Wednesday night, the quiet siege I had maintained broke, but not from Sarah. My phone exploded with calls from her mother. I finally answered one. Her voice was sharp, cutting straight through the receiver like jagged glass. How dare you serve my daughter with divorce papers like she is some kind of criminal? After everything she has done for you? She made one mistake in therapy trying to be open with you, and you are throwing away your entire marriage. I took a breath, letting the irrational anger wash over me without letting it take hold. Mayam, with respect, your daughter told me she would choose another man over me, her husband. That is not a mistake. That is a confession of where her heart actually is. She was being honest. You always told her you wanted honesty in your marriage, and I got exactly that. Now she gets to experience the consequences of that honesty. You are going to regret this for the rest of your life. She hissed. She is the best thing that ever happened to you, and you are too blind to see it. If that is true, I replied, my voice flat. Then I am genuinely excited to see what comes next in my life. Goodbye. I hung up and blocked her number immediately. I knew it sounded petty, but I realized I simply could not handle the emotional manipulation and guilt tripping. I needed to protect my mental health like it was a physical injury. The financial loss was inevitable, but I would not absorb the emotional abuse. Thursday brought a surprise visitor to Ethan's apartment. Sarah's best friend, Carol, showed up unannounced. Apparently, Sarah had told her exactly where I was staying. You need to come home and talk to her like a rational adult, Carol demanded, standing in Ethan's doorway. She is an absolute mess. I am sure she is, I replied. She did not mean what she said in that therapy session. She was confused and overwhelmed. The therapist pushed her into an emotional corner, and she panicked. The therapist asked a simple question. I reminded her. Your friend answered it voluntarily, without being forced, and without hesitation. Marriage takes work. You cannot just walk away because of one difficult conversation. It was one difficult conversation where my wife explicitly told me she would pick her ex over me without even thinking about it. I said, leaning against the door frame. Yeah, actually, I absolutely can walk away from that, and I am walking away. You are being so dramatic about this. I am being clear about my boundaries. There is a significant difference, I corrected her. Please leave. She left reluctantly, but not before telling me I was making the biggest mistake of my life. Everyone, it seemed, had a crystal ball showing me a future of bitter regret. I simply stood my ground, my internal conflict shifting entirely to rational defense. I had established my line in the sand. The marriage was over because Sarah had ended it with her own words. Now I simply had to enforce the boundary. The emotional pleas stopped working, and I knew what came next would be the legal siege. Sarah finally realized that I was serious, that I would not be manipulated back into the house, and that the marriage was irrevocably over. Her response was predictable. If financially painful, she hired an attorney. Not just any attorney, but an aggressive woman named Miranda Cross, known around town for brutal divorce tactics and maximizing financial settlements. The hiring of Miranda Cross and the fact that Sarah's parents were clearly bankrolling the entire operation told me everything I needed to know about how this process would proceed. It would be a fight. Miranda Cross's first move was demanding I immediately vacate the marital home so Sarah could move back in. She had been staying with her parents since I left, and I suppose the trauma and humiliation of that temporary arrangement needed to be immediately rectified. My attorney, Arthur, pushed back firmly. The house is jointly owned by both of you, Walter, he said. Neither party has any legal obligation to leave until it is sold or the divorce is finalized. This is standard posturing. The aggressive, hostile demand, however, shifted my perception of Sarah. She was no longer just a confused wife, but an opponent in a financial war. Then came the financial discovery process, a standard but exhausting part of divorce procedure where both sides disclose all assets, debts, and income sources. Miranda Cross was tenacious. Her attorney began claiming I had hidden money from Sarah because my salary had increased by $15,000 last year due to a promotion I received at my engineering firm. It was absurd. I had not hidden a single thing. My tax returns, which she herself had signed, showed the increase. But they were trying to argue I should have proactively informed her about future earnings potential and that the promotion somehow represented hidden value. Arthur assured me this was just strategic maneuvering, trying to negotiate from a position of manufactured strength, but dealing with it was still expensive and exhausting, slowly draining my retainer. The pressure mounted externally as well. Late Friday evening, Sarah finally managed to get through to me by calling from a random, unlisted number I did not recognize. Please, Walter, can we just talk face to face? I will come anywhere you want. Name the place. Her voice sounded thin, desperate. There is nothing left to talk about, I said, my voice steady. The papers are filed. The process has started. You cannot just end 7 years of marriage like this over one moment. I am not the one who ended it. I countered, the words coming easily, as they were pure truth. You ended our marriage when you told a therapist you would choose your ex over your husband without a moment's hesitation. I am just making it official. I was trying to be honest, she pleaded. You always said honesty was the foundation of our relationship. And now you are getting complete honesty back, I told her. I honestly do not want to be married to someone who fantasizes about another man and admits it out loud in front of witnesses. That is my honest truth. This is not fair. You are punishing me for being vulnerable. I am protecting myself from someone who clearly does not value our marriage the way I do, I corrected her. That is not punishment. That is self-respect. That is self-preservation. She started crying on the phone, telling me she loved me, that she had made a terrible mistake, and that she would do absolutely anything to fix what she had broken. This was the moment I had to go for the jugular, to secure the proof I needed to silence the remaining sliver of doubt I carried. Have you messaged him since the therapy session? I asked quietly. Silence on the other end. The silence was louder than any confession. Have you contacted your ex since I walked out of that room? I pressed. More silence, then a faint, almost whispering admission. I was upset and hurting. I needed someone to talk to who would understand. There it was, the truth revealing itself again. Her very first instinct, when our marriage was in complete crisis, was to reach out to the man, she said, she would choose over me. Thanks for confirming beyond any doubt that I made the right decision, I said, and I hung up the phone. The conversation had shifted my internal conflict entirely. I was no longer fighting for my marriage, but fighting for my freedom. The siege was stressful, but I was resolved to endure it. It was easy for Sarah and her family to frame me as the villain, the cruel husband who abandoned his wife during an emotional crisis. But the constant financial discovery process, the relentless paperwork, and the strategic positioning by Miranda Cross were about to unearth the facts that shattered that convenient, guilt-ridden narrative. The emotional warfare had given way to an intellectual one, and the truth, like always, was highly revealing. The full, sickening picture of Sarah's connection to her ex began to emerge not through our legal teams, but through mutual friends who were still talking to both sides. I learned that the ex had reached out to her first about 6 months ago, beginning with casual messages through Instagram that quickly crossed the subtle boundary from friendly to emotionally intimate. She had never mentioned any of this to me. Not once in 6 entire months, the length of time we had supposedly been struggling with our lost spark. I realized with a sickening, cold wave of certainty. She had been in regular contact with this guy while supposedly working on saving our marriage with me. The pieces clicked into place. The couple's therapy was never really about saving our marriage. It was about easing her guilt while she figured out whether her ex was a viable option for her future. She used me and the concept of fixing us as a safety net and a distraction while actively exploring an alternative. When Arthur brought this up through official channels, because we were not supposed to communicate directly anymore. Sarah's response through Miranda Cross was very telling. She did not deny any of it. She just stated that the conversations were emotionally supportive and not romantic in nature. Cool. So, my wife was getting secret emotional support from her ex for 6 months while we were actively paying for marriage counseling together. Totally normal, healthy marriage behavior. The anger I felt was profound, but it was overshadowed by a deep, clarifying sense of vindication. I had trusted my gut, and my gut had been absolutely right. The marriage was dead long before the therapy session. The session was just the funeral. Meanwhile, the external harassment campaign by her family intensified. Her father called my workplace several times, asking to speak with me directly. My company's human resources department had to get involved when he showed up in the lobby twice, demanding to see me. It was deeply humiliating and unprofessional, but their desperation only reinforced my stance. I consulted Arthur about a restraining order, though he cautioned that without documented physical threats, it probably would not go anywhere. Her sister, not to be outdone, started a text campaign from multiple different numbers I did not recognize, repeating the same mantra: I was destroying the family. I was being needlessly cruel. I needed to be a man and fight for my marriage. Apparently, their definition of being a man meant accepting that my wife openly preferred someone else and just living with that knowledge, fighting to keep someone who had already told me they did not want to be kept. No thanks. But then, the final, crucial plot twist landed, and it was devastatingly satisfying. Ethan, who was connected to a few of the same social circles, showed me something on his phone. Sarah's ex was not actually interested in her the way she thought he was. He had been dating someone else for the past 4 months, someone he was clearly very serious about. Ethan showed me the recent Instagram stories, vacation photos together, meeting each other's families, the entire relationship progression deal. My wife either had not known this crucial detail or had chosen to completely ignore it while fantasizing about him and destroying our home. The revelation was a punch to the gut, but not mine. She had blown up a real marriage for a fantasy that never existed. A guy who had dumped her once before was clearly not available to her now. And she had chosen that impossible fantasy over me? I felt a surge of cold pity, but it was fleeting. I would almost feel sorry for her situation if she had not spent the last 3 weeks trying to take me to the cleaners financially while painting me as the villain. The house went up for sale last week, listed at $485,000 based on comparable sales in the neighborhood. Arthur estimated we should each walk away with around $90,000 after the mortgage was paid off, assuming it sold reasonably close to the asking price. That was the only silver lining in this entire mess, a tangible promise of an independent future. Arthur told me we should be able to finalize everything within the next 2 months if she stopped fighting every minor point and detail. But Miranda Cross kept filing motions to delay and extend the timelines. The longer this dragged out, the more expensive it got for both of us in legal fees. But with her parents bankrolling her entire legal strategy, Sarah had absolutely no incentive to be reasonable or efficient. I was still staying with Ethan. It was cramped and inconvenient, but it was temporary. Once the house sold and I got my share, I would finally get my own place, start completely fresh, and figure out who Walter was outside of a marriage I had genuinely thought would last forever. The truth had set me free, but the price was still being calculated. With the fantasy of her ex now definitively shattered by his visible relationship and impending engagement, Sarah's strategy shifted from emotional denial to pure scorched earth tactics, still comfortably bankrolled by her parents. It was as if she needed to win the divorce to compensate for the emotional loss of her dream scenario. The legal machinery began to grind slowly, expensively. Miranda Cross, Sarah's attorney, filed numerous motions designed solely to delay and extend the timelines. Every minor detail was contested, every financial disclosure was challenged, requiring hours of Arthur's time, and therefore my money, to refute. Arthur explained that this was a classic tactic. increase the emotional and financial burden on the opposing party until they surrender to a more favorable settlement, just to make the headache stop. But I had already accepted the financial reality of the 50-50 split. I was fighting now purely for the principle of a clean break and the right to my own financial future. The most galling maneuver came next. Miranda Cross attempted a desperate play for spousal support. She argued that Sarah was entitled to ongoing financial assistance because she had sacrificed career opportunities to support our marriage and home. I relayed my incredulous reaction to Arthur. Sacrificed. She makes $67,000 a year as a project manager. I make $92,000 as an engineer. We have no children. She was a working professional who simply happens to earn less than me, not a stay-at-home spouse who gave up her career trajectory. That is not a sacrifice. That is a difference in salary. Arthur was calm. You are exactly right, Walter. This is pure posturing. It is her last big play before the house sells. We will systematically demolish this argument in the courtroom. Over the next few weeks, Arthur methodically filed the counter motions. We highlighted Sarah's continuous employment, her significant professional promotions during the marriage, and the absence of any dependent children. The argument was, as Arthur promised, easy to defeat on its merits. But the necessity of fighting it, of pouring thousands more dollars into legal fees, left me feeling profoundly weary. It was an enduring battle fought not with fists, but with bank transfers and legal documents. During this protracted period, I made concrete plans for my post-divorce life. I secured the deposit for a small, one-bedroom apartment in a quiet neighborhood. It was nothing fancy or impressive, but the thought of having my own space, a clean slate with no reminders of Sarah or the life we built, was a powerful motivator. This was a symbol of my freedom, the tangible payoff for the emotional cost. The social fallout continued, serving as an emotional counterpoint to the legal tension. Sarah's family continued their highly effective public relations campaign. Her mother was telling anyone who would listen that I was a monster who abandoned his wife during a mental health crisis. Apparently, the brutal therapy confession had been reframed entirely as a breakdown that I should have compassionately supported her through. The narrative gymnastics required to reach that conclusion were genuinely impressive in their shamelessness. I watched as I lost about 6 friends I had thought were genuine and loyal. They bought into her sympathy game, into the idea of fighting for the marriage. It hurt deeply, but the handful who stuck around and took the time to hear my side, the ones who saw the value in self-respect, were the ones who truly mattered anyway. Ethan was the rock. He let me stay with him the entire time without complaint. He never asked for rent money, never made me feel like a burden, even for a moment. He just went to his musician gigs and tended bar, always there when I came back from another grueling meeting with Arthur. He was the living embodiment of the fact that I did deserve loyalty and genuine support. Do not let the money get to you. Ethan told me one evening, pouring us both a drink. You are buying your way out of years of future resentment, Walter. That is priceless. The house sold slightly under asking price for $472,000, but it was done. The closing date was set, and the end was finally in sight. We were nearing the final hearing. Despite the financial drain, my emotional compass remained fixed on self-preservation. I was enduring the siege, focusing on endurance, and not caving to fatigue or bitterness, knowing the only currency that mattered now was my imminent freedom. The legal war was nearing its conclusion, and soon I would have the final signature I needed to close this chapter forever. The legal machinery ground slowly, but finally, 2 months after the papers were served, the day arrived for the final signature, the end of a 7-year life, played out in a sterile, impersonal courtroom. The last hurdle was the alimony claim. Miranda Cross, in one final, desperate move, tried to convince the judge that Sarah deserved ongoing spousal support. Arthur, my attorney, had everything prepared. He presented Sarah's career path, her current salary of $67,000, my salary of $92,000, and the simple fact that there were no children. He spent 10 minutes flat methodically dismantling the argument that she had sacrificed her career for the marriage. He argued, eloquently, that we were simply two independent, professional adults who had chosen to dissolve a partnership. The judge agreed completely. No spousal support was awarded. The final judgment called for a clean break for both parties, exactly what I had been fighting for. During the final hearing, I saw Sarah in person for the first time in almost 2 months. She looked tired, worn down by the entire grueling process, older somehow than I remembered her. Her skin was paler, and her eyes held a dull resignation. The emotional weight of the fight had clearly taken its toll. She was not alone. Her mother was there in the gallery, shooting absolute daggers at me from across the courtroom, her expression a mask of righteous fury. Her father sat beside her, arms crossed, shaking his head disapprovingly at everything Arthur said. Her sister was conspicuously absent, having apparently had some kind of falling out with Sarah over something completely unrelated to the divorce. Their united front was still there, but the cracks were starting to show, just not on my side. We were asked to approach the long table together to sign the final divorce papers. The formality of the setting was striking, a sharp contrast to the intimate, brutal confession that had started all of this. It was an end rendered by bureaucracy, not passion. As we stood side by side, Miranda Cross hovering nearby, Sarah leaned in and tried to talk to me quietly, her voice barely a whisper. "I hope you know I never meant for any of this to happen, Walter." I signed my name on the final line, setting the pen down deliberately before looking at her. My expression was calm, devoid of the anger and frustration I had carried for months. "I know you did not mean it to happen," I said, my voice low and steady. "That is almost worse, actually." She frowned, confusion flickering in her tired eyes. "What do you mean?" "If you had meant it," I explained. "If you had planned it all out, if you had walked out for him, at least there would have been a reason, some calculation behind it. Instead, you just spoke your truth in a moment of vulnerability. And your truth was that you would choose someone else over me. After everything we built together, after 9 years, it was an accidental truth." Her eyes filled again, quickly. I was confused. I still am confused about everything. "Then I genuinely hope you find clarity eventually," I told her, and I meant it. I really do. "But you are not going to find it with me. You used our safe space to express the desire to leave, and I simply enforced the consequence." She started crying softly, a quiet, muffled sound of genuine grief. Her mother rushed over immediately, glaring at me like I had personally caused this breakdown, confirming my role as the villain in their family's narrative. I turned away, putting a hand briefly on Arthur's shoulder in thanks. I walked out of the courthouse alone. I did not look back at Sarah, her mother, or the courtroom. The closing was simple. The house sold for $472,000, and after the mortgage payoff and all the selling costs and commissions, we each walked away with about $83,000. The retirement accounts got split exactly down the middle. I kept my car, she kept hers, and the personal belongings were divided based on who originally bought what. Total cost of the divorce process for me was about $14,000 in legal fees. Her parents spent considerably more on Miranda Cross, probably close to $25,000. I was poorer financially, but I had secured my peace of mind and the clean break I desperately needed. Here is what happened with her ex, the man who had served as the ghost of my marriage. He never contacted her back after she reached out during our separation. Complete radio silence from him, and now he was engaged to his girlfriend. I saw the announcement on social media last week. My ex-wife's fantasy man was never actually available to her. She had destroyed a real, functioning marriage for an imaginary alternative future that was literally never going to happen. I heard through remaining mutual friends that she was absolutely devastated by his engagement announcement, that she felt betrayed because he had led her on with their messages. The irony was almost too perfect, too complete. She betrayed me for a fantasy about someone who, in her mind, then betrayed her right back by choosing someone else. My core conflict was resolved, I was free. Hers, I suspected, had only just begun. The worst was over for me. Walking out of the courthouse was the official end. The true resolution came in the weeks that followed, in the quiet of my new, small apartment. It was done. I signed the final papers last week. Officially divorced after 7 years of marriage and 9 years together. The final settlement was almost exactly what Arthur had predicted from the beginning. The house sold, and after all the fees, we each walked away with about $83,000. Retirement accounts were split cleanly down the middle. I was poorer financially, having spent $14,000 on legal fees, but my peace of mind was worth every single dollar. Her parents, I knew, had spent closer to $25,000 funding Miranda Cross's aggressive, ultimately unsuccessful tactics. The final month was exhausting, but it was also deeply satisfying in its sense of closure. I moved into my own place 2 weeks ago. It is a one-bedroom apartment, nothing remotely fancy or impressive, but it is completely mine. The neighborhood is quiet, the space is clean, and there are absolutely no ghosts or reminders of a life that is completely over now. The whole saga of her ex, the man who was the catalyst for all of this, completed its predictable cycle. He never contacted Sarah back after she reached out during our separation, maintaining complete radio silence. And then, he got engaged to his girlfriend. I saw the announcement on social media last week. My ex-wife's fantasy man was never actually available to her. She destroyed a real, functioning marriage, messy though it was, for an imaginary alternative future that was literally never going to happen. I heard through the few remaining mutual friends that she was absolutely devastated by his engagement announcement, that she felt betrayed because he had led her on with their messages. The irony, as I had realized weeks ago, was almost too perfect to be real. She betrayed me for a fantasy about someone who, in her mind, then betrayed her right back by choosing someone else. Her mother has been telling anyone who will listen that I am a monster who abandoned his wife during a mental health crisis. Apparently, the therapy confession is now being completely reframed as a breakdown that I should have compassionately supported her through. The narrative gymnastics required to reach that conclusion would be genuinely impressive if they were not so transparently pathetic and self-serving. I did lose about 6 friends I thought were genuine and loyal. Most of the shared social circle went with her. She was always better at the sympathy game. But the handful who stuck around and heard my side are the ones who actually mattered anyway. Ethan was the best man I could have asked for. He let me stay with him the entire time without complaint, never asking for rent money, never making me feel like a burden even for a moment. When I tried to pay him for the extra utilities I had used, he told me to put it toward my new apartment deposit instead. That is what real friendship looks like. Am I bitter about how things ended? Sometimes, honestly. It is hard not to feel some bitterness when you realize someone you loved deeply for 9 years was secretly fantasizing about someone else for at least 6 months. Probably longer. When you realize the therapy was probably never really about saving the marriage, it was about her working up the courage to eventually leave while managing her guilt. But mostly, I am relieved. The worst part was never the divorce itself. It was the years of sensing that something was fundamentally off, but not being able to name it or address it directly. Now I finally know the truth. And knowing, even when the truth hurts deeply, is infinitely better than the alternative of living in that corrosive, vague uncertainty. She sent me one final message last week, after the divorce was completely finalized. It came through email since I had blocked her everywhere else. I know you probably will not read this. It began, But I need to say it anyway. I am sorry. Not for what I said in therapy. I have come to realize I actually meant it at the time, and you deserve to know the truth about where my head was at. I am sorry for not being brave enough to say it sooner, before we wasted more years. I am sorry for wasting your time and your love. I hope you find someone who chooses you first every single time. You deserved that from me, and I could not give it to you. I read it carefully. I did not respond. There was nothing meaningful left to say between us. She was right about one thing, though. I do deserve someone who chooses me first without hesitation. And now I have the opportunity to find that person, even if it takes a while to trust again. Even if it means being alone for now while I heal. The house we built together belongs to someone else now. The future we planned together is completely gone, incinerated on a therapist couch. But I am still here, slightly poorer financially, significantly wiser about people, and finally free from a marriage that was apparently one-sided for longer than I knew. Some people, way back when I first posted my story, asked if I regretted walking out of that therapy session. They asked if I should have stayed calm and talked it through, if I should have given her a chance to explain or take it back. No, I do not regret it for a single second. When someone tells you who they really are, believe them immediately. When someone tells you they would choose someone else over you, let them go. Do not beg. Do not compete for affection. Do not try to convince someone to want you when they have already told you they do not. Just leave with your dignity intact, and do not look back. That is exactly what I did, and it is the best decision I have ever made.